Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Gallant Bodybuilding, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the archetypes or people or things that inspired me to lift weights when I was a teenager or a young man. Now, first and foremost, you guys have to understand that I grew up in a different way than most of you. Most of you probably had dads that used the garage to work on a car and fix something, or put the lawnmower together if it fell apart, or something like that. I never learned any of that stuff, right? So if you ask me to fix a car or something like that, I'll be looking at you with a blank look and an empty sort of mind of some sort, like nothing will be going on up there, because I never learned any of that stuff, you know? But what I did learn was that weights or lifting weights was necessary for life. There was some sort of normalcy about it, like like wearing shoes when you go outside. You know, there was something just normal about it. I grew up around it. My dad had always a garage, or at least every house that we had that had a garage, he had a gym in it. And even when we didn't have a garage, he turned the entire unfinished basement into a gym. And even when I was 4 years old, one of my first accidents happened when my dad was deadlifting on a balcony, because we lived in Iran at the time. We lived actually in the Middle East, I guess you could say. We lived in Iran because he was working for a paper mill over there for an American company. And we all moved over there, and that was before the Iran-Iraq war broke out in '79. So anyway, he was deadlifting on the balcony, and it was hot as heck outside, like it usually was in the summer. And he was sitting and he was all sweaty. And then I went to go lean on my dad when he was done a set, and I slipped and I Supermaned all the way down the stairs and had to go get rushed to the hospital to get stitches. So yeah, great memories. There was a lot of good memories there too, you know, swimming in the Caspian Sea and chasing large bullfrogs. I also learned chickens eat frogs, you know, because one of my neighbors had some chickens, and I saw the chicken just eat this huge frog and just gobble up, you know, the feet go down and everything. I'm like, what? I didn't know chickens ate frogs, but anyway. So, you know, I've been saving the world ever since. By eating chicken breasts and chicken wings and chicken legs, you know, because I'm trying to save the frogs. That's really what I've been doing. So in my mind, I'm a bit of a superhero for that reason mostly. But all joking aside, I grew up, no matter what, around a gym. So even though we were in Iran, my dad had shipped his barbells and plates over so he could squat and deadlift. And that's what he'd be doing on the balcony. I think this is a wooden balcony too. It was like so long ago, but yeah, anyway, the thing didn't fall apart. It was pretty sturdy, and that's what he'd be doing. So first and foremost, what inspired me was mostly the environment I was around, meaning that it was kind of normal. And weight training was a normal thing to do to be healthy. And as much as I avoided it mostly as a kid, because, you know, kids are more interested in playing hide and seek and riding BMX bikes and doing that sort of thing, I was perpetually injuring myself, you know, doing big jumps on BMX bikes or skateboarding down a dirt hill or doing whatever stupid shit I was doing. Because one thing was sure about me, when I was a kid, I was always moving. I was moving in one direction or another. I had all this unbridled energy. I don't know what happened to it, but that's what I had when I was a kid. And there was always the clank of weights in the garage, or the whole house would be shaking as my dad was deadlifting and then dropping the weights on a wooden platform he had above the concrete in the garage, and boom, the whole house would just like rattle. And even the neighbors would be like, what the hell's going on over there? There's these mild tremors happening, right? So I watched my dad work out here and there, but it was kind of like boring for me, right? But because I was playing hockey as a kid, once in a while, he'd try to drag me into the garage and get me into lifting weights, like doing some bench presses or some chin-ups and stuff. And I was really good at calisthenics and all that sort of thing. But I would never really be 100% interested in it, at least not sticking to it forever, because, you know, it was a discipline, and kids aren't really the best at discipline, right? So my main point is that I was always around it. So if my dad wasn't working out with a friend or working out by himself, there was always somebody coming over to lift weights in the garage. I don't know if you ever read Bret the Hitman Hart's autobiography or whatever, but he talked about his father was always in the basement tying guys up in wrestling moves, right? And torturing people, and that's how he got into wrestling. So it's kind of like me. I got groomed into it as something like that. So I mean, I even remember when this kid David Biskey broke my crayons in grade 1. I was so effing pissed at the guy because he would just do stuff just to pretend he's tough. Like he was you know, like we were grade 1. It was so stupid. It feels like such a funny thing to talk about now, But I remember how seriously we took ourselves in grade 1. And this kid, he'd be spitting and stuff and like, oh man, sorry man, I'm just too strong. I broke all your crayons. That was his literal, those were his literal words, right? And every time we go for recess or lunch break, he'd grab me and try to wrestle with me and then wrestle me down and then say, oh, sorry man, I'm too strong or I'm too tough. So I got it in my head that, hey dad, I want to lift some weights because this kid David Biskey's wrestling me down and stuff. So I went down the basement. I just lifted this 20-pound barbell 20-pound barbell over my head and down, up and down. It was total CrossFit. Honestly, I was doing CrossFit before everybody else was doing it, but I was lifting this barbell. And after only a few weeks of doing this, I shit you not, a few weeks to a month, when David Biskey started wrestling with me, all of a sudden, I was throwing him around like a rag doll. Like he couldn't do anything with me anymore. It was the funniest thing. And so I had this positive reinforcement, or almost like this initiatory process with what lifting weights could do in grade 1. Like I was only 5 years old. So I had kind of stepped away from doing that, and I was always an athlete. Like I was running and jogging and doing these different types of things like, sports day in elementary school and stuff. And I was really good at jogging and endurance work, funny enough. But I was still a smaller sort of kid. But as I became a teenager and puberty hit, and a lot of kids, like they were like full manhood by the time they were 13, and I was kind of trailing behind, the discrepancy and weight difference between me and them became too much to make up, right? I mean, when somebody outweighs you by like 60 or 70 pounds, it's pretty tough to overcome that with good cardio, if they want to wrestle you down or something. So I remember reading a lot of the muscle magazines, and because my dad, again, because he had a gym, he had all these muscle magazines sitting around all the time. He always had Muscle and Fitness and Flex, like there was always this stuff around. So he's always inspiring himself, and my mom would be like, those guys are gross and stuff, but my father would just always be thumbing through those magazines and stuff. And then my brother and I naturally started looking at them, especially once we started weight training and started to take it a little bit more seriously to get stronger and tougher because of some of the people we were dealing with in our school. And once I started to look at the magazine, of course, you start to get, your favorite bodybuilders, and you start to like or have preferences of who you like the best or who's your superhero, kind of like your favorite WWF or WWE wrestler or whatever back in the day, right? So yeah, I remember liking guys like Mike Matarazzo and Michael Francis and Sean Ray, of course, and Lee Haney. Like they were unreal. Like their physiques were unbelievably symmetrical. They look cartoony in a different way than a lot of the bodybuilders today. I find a lot of the bodybuilders today, I don't know whether it's just the way I'm looking at things, because I've got a different sort of way of looking at things, different perspective, because I'm older and wiser now, I guess. Or maybe I'm wiser. Sorry, that was a misstep there. I'm older. Okay. So anyway, I'm looking at guys and I'm seeing that there was some sort of aesthetics. There was some sort of like sculpturesque way the physiques were back then, which was, let's just say as a teenage guy, it just looked like almost like superhero come to life. It looked really neat. So my brother, I know his favorite was guys like Rich Gasperi and Sean Ray. And me, I like guys like Mike Quinn. I don't even know if anybody can remember him, but the mighty Mike Quinn was really neat, and Gary Stridham and of course Mike Matarazzo, like I already mentioned, and the Lee Haneys and stuff. Like they were all kind of like influential in motivating me to train. And then of course, once the 90s started to come, 1990, 91, I graduated in 91 from high school, right? And that's when the Dorian Yates and the Flex Wheeler and the Kevin Levrone, these guys started to appear on the scene and stuff, and they had a really cool look in themselves. It's almost like they all became, or a lot of them became mass monsters, but with shape in a way. Like they weren't the mass monsters that we see today, right? The mass monsters we see today are just, I don't know, they just look different, right? A gorilla-like in some way, a lot of the guys, right? So, but yeah, I would say some of my favorites were guys like Mike Quinn and stuff. I don't know, it was just the way they carried themselves in the photo shoots, or the story that was around them. There was a certain sort of fascination around them. And that was kind of the neat thing. And of course, I was naive back then. I thought, it was possible for me to one day make it to 250 pounds as a natural bodybuilder and bench press 500 pounds for reps or something. And that was my goal. And I did quite well considering the natural limitations, but at the same time, these guys were really what I looked up to. Now, the other influence that was amazingly huge in the 80s was also these action superstars that you saw in the movies, right? Like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and these guys, they always had these physiques, you know? So there was this other influence. It wasn't just from the bodybuilding, but it was also in the movies and in the pop culture and stuff. There was this alpha masculinity kind of celebration of being the hero, you know? And I think to a disempowered teenager who was getting bullied or basically or not necessarily fitting in certain social structures, that was really alluring because, you know, when you're powerless, you seek power, right? And yeah, so that was the influence. So I like Jean-Claude Van Damme, like, you know, all these guys, the movies and stuff. I was obsessed with martial arts movies and bodybuilding and kind of combining the two. So I really wanted to become like a, you know, Chuck Norris, Jean-Claude Van Damme, right? Unfortunately, I couldn't act, but then again, some of the action stars couldn't act either. but yeah, if I was going to say what my influence was, it was a lot of the movies along with some of these really cool physiques like the Mike Quinns and Mike Matarazzos and Kevin Lavronis and Sean Rays and that sort of thing. So yeah, somebody just asked me what my influence was, and that's really what my influence was at that time. So I think that kind of shaped me as far as this is the way to achieve something in your life. But at the same time, I knew I hit a certain level or a certain plateau at a certain point in my training. And I realized that being a natural bodybuilder was something different. And then I sought out to compete in that realm and stay there. So that's when I started to drop these idols, as far as I started to realize that there was something else going on with these guys that I could never kind of go towards. And so I then pushed myself into competing in natural bodybuilding. And yeah, and the rest is history. And then of course I showed up on YouTube, and you guys are clicking on here. So yeah, that's basically mostly my influence. I hope that kind of gave you some sort of insight on what kind of shaped my psychology at that time in my life to basically train. And I hope this helps out in your training. And yeah, there was your flashback to the 80s. Mountain. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com. And thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now. Natural Gallant.